Idris, I'm so glad to be with you today talking about Parentheses of Blood. My first question for you is how would you describe Parentheses of Blood to someone who's never heard about this show?
Okay. I think it's been described as a farce and a satire.
Okay.
I would add dark to that. It's a dark farce and a satire, absurdist. I would also add to that in the veins of Beckett and
Okay.
Ionesco. It's a bit relentless. And so the story centers in itself in an unknown African nation that is under authoritarian rule. And it follows a group of soldiers who are sent to assassinate the rebel leader
Wow.
Libertatio. Uh, the name indicates what his freedom fight is all about.
Yeah.
And but the problem is that he's already dead, and so what follows is a relentless exercise in authoritarian violence and military rule that illuminates, uh, I guess, a lot of what is going on around the world today, including maybe even in our own country.
Yeah.
But it
Oh,
is an African play. It was written by a Congolese playwright, Sonny Labutansi. So it's a bit difficult to describe unless you're familiar with maybe European absurdist comedy. You might have something notion of what you're in for,
hmm.
but plays like this don't get done that much on our shores. I think if you think of Genet's The Maids,
Hmm.
it's a bit like that in its way around and sense of humor.
Okay.
Hmm.
That's really exciting. I
Yeah.
love your use of the word relentless too.
Yes.
Um, yeah. What is your history with this play?
Okay.
Um,
I'm glad you asked that question. So this is the third time I've directed this play,
wow.
and the third time I've directed the play in university setting. So each time I've directed it, it has been with university students in the university under the guise of the university theater department. Um, it was introduced to me through Judith Miller, who's heads the French department at NYU, who was at the University of Wisconsin-Madison at the time when I was in graduate school in the University of Iowa. And I went to see it because I was studying African theater and I was just consuming whatever I could.
Yeah.
And it was in French, and it was something that I felt an affinity to. I felt that it was really funny, and I guess my background is with the San Francisco Mime Troupe. So I have a background in this type of theater, and political farce is something have always been drawn to. And so I wanted to know more about this play. And I spoke to Judith Miller about it. I spoke to Sandra Barkin, who is the graduate dean at Iowa, who's also an African theater expert. And the minute the play was released in English, it was translated by Lorraine Alexander. I was I got a call from all of them. They were like, "Your play, your play." And that year, um, I did the play. So I think that was around 2006 or 5. And it was at Naropa University. And I subsequently did the play at Indiana University. And it was always my swan song. I was always being thrown off the campus with one last play to do. And so I would do this play, and I told my cast, always met with the wrath of the institution who somehow thought the play was about them. But honestly, I chose the play because I think the play has something to say about. I think it's a great warning call for um, freedom. It's a cry for freedom, but a warning call against those who would limit freedoms. And it also exposes the futility of war and the damage it has on the most innocent people who are just trying to live their lives and have the ramifications of war encroach upon them, endanger them, move them out of their home, and people are just simply trying to like live and eat and build families. And
Yeah.
so this is part of what attracts me to the play. And um, I felt at the time that it was a play you could do every year until people got it, until people really woke up. And it's kind of, I think, as a socialist political theater advocate, I think we do think of the what play. I think for many it's the mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are always the political texts that live on, and Crap's Last Tape. Those, yeah.
Yeah.
So this became one of an oeuvre of political plays that I'm forever interested in because times don't unfortunately change that much. I'm drawn to the work of Dario Fo. A lot of what I find in Fo interesting, I find about Soni Labutansi that they're writing under the most authoritarianist, imperialist regimes, and they're doing it in a way that the authorities can't recognize. So it's kind of funny that authorities where I've done it have thought they recognized themselves in it when that was really wasn't the intention. But then Soni Labutansi did it, and it was the intention, and they failed to get it. It passed censorship, just as Dario Fo's Face often did. So that is my interest. And the other reason I do the play, or I chose to play, or I continue to choose to play, is that I'm interested in understanding more about absurdist comedy and understanding more about this play in particular. I don't understand everything that's inside of it. I think I understand a lot more than the first time I did it. But the first time I did it, I thought, I don't know anything about this play, but I really like it. And so directing to me can also be a way of understanding a play, of really digging in and opening up what you don't know.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
And because you're doing it with college students, and they're different students each time, I'm assuming that collaboration brings something different to the room each time and informs the play differently.
Yeah, it does. So this cast is not anything like the cast from Indiana, nor was the cast from Indiana anything like the cast from Naropa. So the Naropa students, I believe, chose with me this play, and we were studying anti-imperialism and colonialism and decolonialism. We were studying in Ngugi and a lot of Edward Said and
Yeah.
Roland Barthes and all those guys. So it was it was aligned with their studies in a way that we really got to dig deep, and thank God, because that was my first time doing it, and so we all dug in together.
Yeah.
At Indiana University, we had different resources to look at the play. There were professors in Complet and who comparative literature who were interested in the work, who were interested in the work of Soni Labutansi. There were some French literature experts who were agog that we were doing this way, and so I got help with that. They looked at the translation. We talked about some things that could be different, and the students were probably furthest away from the life of the characters in the play itself, being Midwestern, but not all. I tend to attract on college campuses international students a lot. Maybe it's due to a lot of the work I do is not steeped in a cultural genre, but more steeped in a theatrical genre, like absurd. I do a lot of satire and absurdism,
Okay.
and that is what I find here at Sanford. It's no different. The cast is very, I would say, globally centered. So We have people from China, Sri Lanka,
Wow.
the United States, India. And I think, therefore, there's a little bit more familiarity with the world, and also with being able to own the character's psyche and play them without the busyness, I would say, of American theaters. Um, how do I say this politely? Chokehold on realism. That's as polite as I can put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that realism and the strangled hold it has over American theater, I am so one to break. And I think that's part of what we hear when we try to open up and people talk about different voices and the lack of diversity. A lot of the resistance to that is verisimilitude, or it's the need to find realism or promote realism in theater.
Right.
And to me, I'm very much interested in theater's own language. The theatricality of a play is interesting to me, not how close it is to real life. I'm more interested in how more absurd it is, how farthest away it is from anything that we can imagine. I'm very fond of playwright Robert O'Hara's work, and he was a mentor to me as a director
Wow.
when I was working as a director through TCG's program, and I've directed several of his pieces. And he came to Naropa to direct a play and work with the students, many of whom did Parentheses of Blood, and they worked on a play of his, and he had a saying that I continue to let ring in the room. He said, "I will not be limited by your imagination." And that is my mantra, and I want to give that mantra to everybody. Do not be limited, one, by your own imagination, but certainly by someone else's.
Definitely.
And so the plays like Parentheses of Blood, in its absurdism, in its connections to human folly, it allows us, and in its style, it allows us to usurp realism and play theatrically. And, yeah.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I think sometimes it's easy for audiences in the US to forget that realism and being steeped in realism is a Western concept in a
Very
lot of ways.
much,
It doesn't
yeah.
have to be that way. So
No.
exciting to break free from that and from the
Yeah.
training that surrounds that as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when people think of a play like Parentheses of Blood and all of its references to blood and mayhem and state violence, that it seems very depressing. But I find the opposite to be true. It gives me a lot of joyful energy to play inside these characters, and I think the actors would say the rehearsals are fun. We have a lot of fun, and it's it's not clown fun yet.
Yeah.
It may rise to that level,
Okay.
but it certainly doesn't. Um, it's not depressing to talk about the material. It's actually enlightening and refreshing, right? To look at it comedically.
Yeah. Well, and so on that note of the actors having fun and the rehearsals being a fun space, what does that collaboration look like in the rehearsal room?
So we have several other people who are helping me direct the play.
Okay.
Um, uh, Stephanie Hunt is she teaches here, right?
It's great.
And she's the vocal coach. Lots of work with a vocal coach. I mean, as an actor, a vocal coach for me is a coach. It's another way in. It's almost as important a voice as a director, because you're dealing with text, and so text is important. We have Carla Pantoja, who is fight. You know Carla?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Carla's our fight and intimacy
Okay.
coach. So whenever I do a play about violence or with violence, I find a fight captain who's not just interested in choreography, but is also interested in the nature of violence and the world of violence.
Yeah.
And so that often helps us understand what we're doing. Because sometimes you go, okay, I'm shooting my castmate in the head. What are we doing? Like, what are we doing
Yeah.
to each other? What are we doing to the audience? So we understand what we're doing, why it's funny, right?
Mhm.
And what the statement means politically.
Yeah. I just want to flag something that you said that is so gracious as a director, and I think also illustrates your rehearsal room. But you mentioned that these are people that are helping direct the show.
Absolutely.
I don't think all directors think like that. I think that there's often this mentality of people coming in and complimenting the work.
Well,
But
I really have sort of been in on and embraced equity. And a lot of talk has been made about equity. And and particularly, I had a student who did 2 How rounds on designing with an equity lens.
okay.
And so it's always been something that's interested me. It's something I learned from Robert O'Hara is everybody pulls this train.
Yeah.
Like nobody's slacking and also nobody's a star. Nobody's above it all, right? We can all move a chair. We can all say a line. And so that's how I like to work. I like to think of designers. I've always felt that designers were always brought in to attach onto a play as opposed to be part of the creative team. And so I was spoiled early on by working one of my first professional directing jobs. I worked with Eugene Lee, the
Okay.
Tony Award winning Eugene Lee. There are 2 of them. There's a playwright.
Okay.
I worked
Oh,
with both.
cool.
But Eugene Lee, the set designer, lighting designer, Saturday Night Live's production designer. He's a very accomplished, wild child, and I was really fortunate that he agreed to work with me, and he was in rehearsal every single day,
Wow.
and he built the set around us. He built the set in what was necessary and what was visceral, and nothing. He was above nothing. You know, took place in a drug factory, so the entire theater smelled like a drug factory. And so his attention to the story really showed me how designers can help you interpret a story as opposed to just putting light on something, giving beautiful things to sit on,
Right.
or, putting
Yeah.
light on someone's
Really
face.
shaping a world in a
Yeah.
different way.
So consequently, I have a lighting designer that I've worked with for 35 years.
Wow.
She's lit almost everything that I've ever directed because we have a language together.
Yeah.
And we're working now, work with Rotumi Babiaka, who's also a lecturer here. We co-direct together because we have this language that, I find he has a certain sensibility and, dare I say, youthfulness and energy that he brings that I can't, it's not mine, it's his. But together we pretty much get as much as we can out of a script.
Yeah.
Right? The idea is to have everything important. And so I think if everything matters, then design matters, all of that matters. Now I do take greatly the responsibility of my name being listed as director. That's a really huge task. And, whatever's blame there is will land at your feet generally. So, but I don't think it's helpful to direct as if you know everything.
Yeah. It's just such a beautiful, generative and collaborative and generous space that I hear you speaking from. And it makes me even more excited to see this play that's being birthed from this really
Yeah.
collective energy.
And I studied this way. I studied during the Black Arts movement with African American directors and African directors. I studied with African creators like Chuck Mike and Dapo Adelupa in Nigeria, Femi Oshofi-san. These are all popular artists.
Yeah.
And I was part of La Familia with Solomon Iguanre, who just passed this past May, who created work as we were rehearsing. So we were rehearsing, he's literally writing hours before and during and after.
Wow.
And we may get a new scene that goes in, because I was working with a comedy troupe called La Familia. And he wrote for us, but it was all instant. It was spontaneous. It was collaborative. And so that's how I was trained.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. We're out of time for now,
Great.
but I'm really excited for this show, and we're so glad to have you at Stanford for this
I'm
time.
really
We're
happy
grateful.
that Stanford agreed to do this. I think it's really a unique and special engagement.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you. This is Marina Johnson signing off.